great to be here. This is a really fantastic summit that MLevel's put together. I definitely spent time yesterday watching the presentations and listening in. So good stuff, good content.
Brandon, you should be able to go ahead and just share
All right, let
from the
me.
bottom.
Okay, still giving me cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing. See if I can get to it now.
Okay, see if you can do it
Okay,
now.
now I
We've
think I
stopped.
can do it. How's that? Let's see if everyone can.
Perfect. We see your screen.
Can everyone see what I'm doing now? Okay, fantastic. Thank you again. It's a great honor to be here. I will apologize a little bit ahead of time here before I get started. I actually work at the airport, right near the airport, so there may be some aircraft noise coming in every now and then. I get a great view of the runway from my office, so we have a lot of flights coming in and out. So I apologize for that ahead of time. I'll try to talk over the jets as much as I can. But again, like I said, it's great to be here. I really have been fortunate over my career to have worked with lots of interesting organizations as time's gone on in my career, over 20 years in learning, and just wanted to kind of compound on what Jordan said, and what Josh both said, moving from West Coast to East Coast. I spent a good 2/3 of my career in technology companies because I was just physically located in Silicon Valley. And then came to Atlanta to work with Home Depot for 4 years on a learning technology transformation that they were going through, and then came over to Delta in 2018 to continue that transformation for from a learning standpoint here at Delta. Um, and that's really primarily why I'm calling this topic today what I'm calling it. So I'm trying to be a little provocative. Today's discussion is really going to be a little bit of that, a call to action for learning and development to reorient itself due to the impact of the digital age. And as Josh said, or as Jordan said, I want to thank Jordan and MLevel for providing a copy of the book that I wrote last year, published actually in 2017. That's a great honor that they're doing that. It's quick read. Quite frankly, a lot of what I'm going to talk about today comes out of it, but it's generated. Uh, I generated it based on the impact that the digital age is having on us as humans, on business, and on workplace performance. And I'll just say the great thing about the book, if you want to spend some time reading it, it's a quick read. The great thing about it are not what I wrote, but what the contributors who spent some time giving their perspectives on the digital age and its impact on learning provided for the book. So it's really all about some great contributions from folks in the industry and also just some thought leaders on digital transformation as well. So thank you, Jordan and MLevel, for providing that for everyone. I appreciate that. What do I do at Delta? So I lead a team that focuses on the airport customer service and cargo division. So this is one of 5 divisions within Delta. Each one of these divisions has their own learning function and really operate kind of as a separate business, if you will. But our division runs the operations in the 328 airports across the world in which Delta does business. So we support all of the employees that you'll see in an airport, helping you check in your baggage, get your ticket for your flight, and then get you on the plane and get your luggage loaded and get the plane taken care of so that it can take off. And then when you get to your destination, making sure you get your bag in 20 minutes or less and get on your way. It represents the largest employee base in Delta, this division does. So we have quite a bit of um, a broad portfolio, if you will, of training that we provide, everything from all of the regulatory and FAA mandated training for compliance and qualification for roles, all the way to leadership development and the essential skills around customer experience and onboarding that our folks need. So we have quite a big portfolio for this audience of over 30,000 of our agents across the world. So what I want to really talk about today is the digital age, and you're coming to this presentation with the title of Should L&D Own the Customer Experience? And the reason I use that title is because the jolt I'm talking about today is how the digital age is impacting every aspect of how we live and work. And I'm the reason I used that title was to get you thinking about a different way for L&D to reorient itself to be better prepared to drive our businesses forward in the digital age. It's an age that's dramatically altering the construct of our societies. It's exponentially increasing the speed and complexity of business, and it's fundamentally transforming how we work. And all of us in learning, in IT, and in the business functions kind of have that exhausted look on our face a lot because we are really still in the formative stages of this transformation. It is probably the largest scale job transition that we've ever been under, definitely since the Industrial Revolution. And so this is a big deal. And we're, being an L&D, we're smack dab in the middle of it, right? So today's discussion, I'm going to talk about really three parts of this. How it's impacting how we live, how it's impacting our business, again, and then of course how we work, and then how it impacts us in the L&D function, so we can better be reoriented to support our folks. I'm going to open up, if I can, the chat window in case there's any questions as we go along. Please feel free to throw in any questions or anything in the chat, and I'll try to answer that as we go along. So first, how we live. Let me get back to my presentation here. Let's take a look at just us as humans. First of all, there's 7.5 billion of us on Earth now. By 2030, there's going to be another billion, 8.5 billion of us crowding this Earth. And each year, over 60 million people are in the developing countries on Earth are moving into cities. In 1950, about 2/3 of the human population lived in non-urban settlements, a third in urban settlements. And by 2050, we're going to completely reverse that. So what we're witnessing right now is the largest human migration in our history. It's going on right now as we are definitely urbanizing all around the globe. And this urbanization trend it's actually quite amazing when you think about it, but really when you take a look at it, China is really the most dramatic in how we're urbanizing this quickly. The population of its cities has quintupled in just the last 40 years, totaling now over 800 million people living in urban environments in China. In just 10 years, 2030, 1 in 5 city dwellers on Earth will be Chinese. It's interesting because on this map, it shows you the 19 clusters, the megacity clusters that China is currently building. These 19 clusters will be responsible for 9/10 of all Chinese economic activity, which you can imagine is the soon-to-be largest economy on Earth. But they're really focused on three clusters right now. So if you look at the Hong Kong area, they're clustering 60 million people in that area. If you look at the Shanghai area, 152 million people are being clustered there. And in the Beijing area, 112 million people are clustering there. And just to kind of give you an idea of the size, the depth and breadth of the scale, if you will, of this, the largest city cluster right now on Earth is in Tokyo with about 40 million people. And comparing that, if you look at the cluster around Shanghai, that's going to be about 4 times the size of Tokyo. And they're rapidly underway in building these clusters now. And then if you take a look at Africa, that's another interesting area. to focus in on urbanization. As of 2000, the population of Lagos, Nigeria was roughly about 7.2 million people, somewhere between those of Greater Philadelphia and Chicago combined. But by 2030, it's going to be 24 million people, as large a metropolitan area as New York and London combined. So it's interesting that Nigeria is set to surpass the US to become the third most populous country on earth by 2050. And nowhere are cities growing faster on earth than in sub-Saharan Africa, where the number of city dwellers will triple by 2050 to 1.3 billion people. So these are just two kind of dramatic examples, if you will, of the urbanization that's going on. And you're probably wondering, like, why is he way up here talking about urbanization? It's interesting to note that this migration is going on right now because of a few reasons that we can pinpoint to the digital age, if you will. This is a massive scale. It's occurring quickly, and the key thing that's really one of the impacts of this change is how we are connecting to each other, how we're communicating, and also how we're working. It's definitely affecting all of that. But there's three key drivers to this urbanization trend. The urbanization trend that's going on now is linked to the decline of the global agricultural economy. And so as the digital age shifts employment to manufacturing, technology, and services, that is driving a lot of the need for people to centralize or cluster, if you will. And then second, productivity and efficiency has spread wealth to more humans than ever before in our history. But it's also radically transforming consumer expectations and their desire for customized services and experiences. And then third, when humans cluster, economic activity is more dense, and it creates shorter trade links, and we tend to share knowledge more quickly between ourselves. So these are the three key drivers that are really the foundational components, if you will, of this urbanization trend. And I don't know if any of you have really thought deep about this or not. I think you'll leave this presentation hopefully thinking more about this trend that's going on. I mean, any of us that are driving around LA or Atlanta or any of these more congested cities feel it constantly. I drive to the airport every day, and the cluster of cars, if you will, are maddening at times. But urban planning is obviously key and necessary for us as we start to cluster more. In the US, it's a little different in that we've clustered quite a bit, but we're also suburbanizing a bit. So we are spreading our urban areas out a little. And in fact, Atlanta has become the fourth largest urban sprawl on earth right now. So you can stand anywhere in Atlanta, and 60 to 70 miles around you, you can still call that Atlanta. So it's quite an interesting juxtaposition to be in as we are going through this transformation going forward. So that does impact, though, how we conduct business. And there are really three forces at play that are driven by the digital transformation that's going on right now. So again, it makes sense to think of that first force, if you will, being globalization. So global access to markets and talent is completely altering the fundamentals of business operations. I mean, supply chains have had to become more efficient, increasing volume and turnaround. When you think of the efficiency of supply chains, one of the focus areas we had at Home Depot was, quite frankly, looking at and worrying and keeping us up at night were things like what Amazon was going to do in their supply chain. Because I can guarantee you that Amazon will get you a washer and dryer in 30 minutes installed in your house before anyone else, if we're not careful. So that would keep us up at night at Home Depot. How can we get our supply chain to be so efficient that we're going to be able to get you what you want within not weeks and days that it used to be, but really within hours and minutes. So that's driving a lot of that efficiency around supply chains, which is leveraging the global markets to make that happen. But along with this, consumer expectations, as I said earlier, shifted. So that's overwhelmingly affect how we design our products, how we design our services, and how we conduct our manufacturing processes. And then you look at the second force in play, which is demographics. So multiple generations, up to 5 uh, next year, will be working side by side in companies, which creates quite a unique talent development challenge for folks like us in L&D, right? As we have a broad array of demographics in the workforce. In fact, in 2016, more than a third of the US workforce turned age 50 or older. And so that's about 115 million people who soon will be planning and or exiting from the workforce. And as they move out of the workforce and retire, which actually is happening, more than 30 to 40,000 a month are retiring, we're expecting quite a labor and skills shortage, primarily a skills shortage, to come from that. So again, this is going to pose a massive transformation in how we hire and train the workforce that we need to replace. And then third, of course, technology, right? We can't forget that. And it's interesting, I put technology as the third force at play driving the digital age and the digital transformation, because it's really not all about technology. It's really about globalization and the demographic challenges first. And then of course, technology is a key part, but not the only part. So when some people talk about digital, they just think technology. But this more integrated global economy is affecting every business system. So almost any business at any size is reconfiguring their work processes because of new technology that can help drive more efficiency and productivity, and faster access to getting products and services to market. But almost every business is evaluating their systems from back to front, seeking those efficiency enhancements and optimizations of internal processes. I'm sure there's not any of us in this audience that isn't impacted by these changes going on within our workplaces, especially as new systems replace older systems and we have to conduct training around that. So those three forces are at play. But quite interesting is this report that came out last year from Accenture. And if you Google that source, Accenture Reworking the Revolution, you can read this research paper at no charge. There's some interesting data that came out of it. But Accenture gathered, I think, over 700 chief executive officers to ask them questions about how the digital age is impacting their businesses, and really also about the future of work. So the whole report is quite interesting. I just pulled out a couple of these little gems here. It's almost every CEO surveyed in this report believes that technology will improve worker capabilities, and they're increasing spending on intelligent technologies like AI by upwards of 60% year over year. So as Jordan was mentioning earlier, if he talks about AI's impact on business at all this afternoon, we all need to up our capabilities and understanding of artificial technologies, definitely artificial intelligence and all of the underlying technologies that drive that, because it is going to not only impact how our business gets done, but also how our workers interact with the systems that are going to be put into place. So global spending on AI shows no sign. It's raising significantly and shows no sign of slowing down. And this year, even like it says here, 60% year over year. So businesses are investing there, they're focused there, they're trying to figure out how these technologies can integrate into their existing infrastructures or replace their existing infrastructures to drive more opportunities for business. Now, in that report, 32% of those CEOs are also concerned about the availability of key skills in their workforce as a threat to growing their business. And quite frankly, there just simply aren't enough people with the skills that businesses need to implement these new technologies going forward. So when you contrast that with this number, though, here's where I think we have what I would call a CEO problem. So of those CEOs who said technology investment is increasing significantly, little less than a majority of them, but a significant number of them are worried about their workforce capabilities to leverage this technology to drive their strategies. Only 3% of them are significantly increasing their investment in their training function. And so this is that sort of disruptive call to action moment that I think we in L&D have got to sit and figure this out. So we have executives who have an imperative to integrate more technology. We have executives who are worried about their workforce capability, but for some reason that they don't feel an imperative to invest more in their corporate training function. So we have to sort of ask ourselves some of these difficult questions here of like, why is that? Why do we not have the right seat at the table? Are we not in the conversation when we need to be in the conversation? Are we not driving, the workplace performance and capability like we need to be? Are we not valued as a trusted provider of solutions that will drive that capability? Are we forgotten? All these questions we need to ask ourselves. And that's why I'm saying we need to reorient ourselves. We need to think about really all of what we do and how we run the business of learning. And we need to start infusing ourselves into those conversations more to find where our business impact really is, where our value proposition really is. Because this is a dissonance factor here. This is a big challenge and a big problem. And so, I really think the next 5 years will be more disruptive for corporate learning than the last 50 combined. If you look at workplace automation, the exit of the baby boomers that I was talking about earlier, and the fight for talent and resources, it's going to be unlike any we've ever seen. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the largest scale job transition we've ever been in. And so we really need to be front and center of helping our businesses figure this out. And to sort of bring a little bit of an example to this job transition, a colleague of mine at Bloomberg has moved into a learning role. She actually was not in learning, in a learning function at Bloomberg, but she was asked to come into an accounting group, 500 accountants in this group, and work on a job scale transition for all of those accountants. So instead of traditional accounting skills, the company needs them to transition their skill sets to be programmers and coders. And so her job was to come in and up-level or reskill really 500 accountants to be programmers and coders and more analytic with the data. And so when Bloomberg need these skills in their company, when they went to market, they couldn't find 500 people or even 400 people to fill these job roles. And so their option was, we have to reskill our workforce. And so she's coming in and leading this multi-year strategy to reskill these folks. And we're going to find that becomes a little bit more of a conversation in a lot of our businesses moving forward. You may not have the opportunity to go on the market and buy these skills. You may have to reorient yourselves and be able to reskill a lot of the workforce as we go forward. So I found this quote pretty interesting. And again, if you can get a snapshot or a link of this quote, I thought it was a pretty interesting quote. Oop, didn't mean to go away from it. Let me go back. Sorry about that. By 2030, as many as 375 million workers, or roughly 14% of the global workforce, may need to switch occupational categories as digitization, automation, and advances in AI disrupt the world of work. It really doesn't matter what business you're in. If you think you're safe from this, you're not. And so your workforce will be impacted. And when I hear folks talk about, quote, knowledge workers, and this is a quote that came from John Hagel in my book. He argues that every worker now is a knowledge worker, because every worker at every level will be interacting with technology from now on to get their job done. So that train has left the station. Technology is going to be a part of every level of job going forward. And then when you get into smarter technologies like AI, which is really going to disrupt how we work, there's going to be quite a significant disruption in the tasks that people do in their jobs. So this is an interesting report if you want to download that. Now, when you think about workplace automation, just to sort of grab this this category a bit, because it does get a lot of discussion going on, and there's really two streams of thought when it comes to workplace automation. John Hagel, again, I reference him because he contributed to the book, but he to the book I wrote, but he talks about workplace automation being very disruptive. In fact, so disruptive that he sees so many jobs and tasks being displaced that there's probably going to be some sort of uprising, revolution, that kind of thing. And then there's the other train of thought that goes along the lines of we've always had significant transitions. Granted, none quite as fast as what this one seems to be driving us toward, but humans have been really pretty good at finding ways to keep us doing things that won't disrupt us too much. So there's two streams of thought there on that. I mean, who knows where it's really going to go to? But there is an understanding that automation in the workplace quite potentially could impact about 50% of all U.S. jobs. And so it's just not yet certain if all the talk about AI, for example, will bring about a job apocalypse or a task apocalypse. But it's interesting to note how some of our businesses are transitioning and integrating smart technologies into their operations. If considering what I was talking about earlier on supply chain efficiency, if you look at Amazon, just a few years ago, they had about 1,400 robots in their supply chain. In just 3 years, they moved to 45,000 robots in their supply chain. So that's quite a significant integration of automation in their supply chain, which is literally driving their move from, first of all, they really brought the revolution of free shipping forward for everyone, and that expectation that shipping is free. And then they moved it to 2-day, and now they're moving it to 1-day. And eventually, like I said, almost near instant, where just within minutes, they've got your box for you, your package for you. Even to the effect that they might want to just be standing in your house ready to give you your order before you make the order, right? So they're really trying to get very predictive with this. But at the same time they integrated that many robots, they also hired 200,000 humans in that same time span. So I don't know I don't know if this apocalypse really is going to be that revolutionary, if you will, but there's definitely going to be an impact on certain types of jobs as we go forward. So it's really important for us to understand that software, robots, other intelligent machinery will be integrated into our operations, our businesses, and perform critical tasks for us. And those aren't just frontline tasks. I mean, it's going to be impacting, like I said, every level, if you will, of work. And so many of us will be working alongside robots. Robots will train us. We will train robots. But automation definitely is a part of our work future going forward. And we're going to, in L&D, it's unique for us because we're going to have to be bridging all those gaps brought about by the human and machine intelligence that needs to interact together, to get their jobs done. So it doesn't seem like this is necessarily an immediate thing happening, but if you think about that number of robots integrated into Amazon's supply chain and how software is really moving quickly to automate and to assist us with so many of our roles that we perform, it's moving quicker than things have in the past, that's for sure. So one interesting thing that comes out of this, though, is what are the human skills? What are the things that make us uniquely human that keep us separated from intelligent machinery? And so if you dig into AI at all, if you feel like you want to dig in, there's a great course put out by Gene Meister at the Future Workplace organization, and it's AI for HR, and it's a great course just for folks who are kind of in this HR and L&D space to get a good understanding of AI's impact, especially in the short run. But if you think about the human skills that are not going to go away from us, it's really about making decisions and finding information for people, and definitely leadership. So these are the skills and capabilities that all of our organizations are going to need more of during this job transition process. Knowing may not be as important anymore because you have information at your, I mean, we've all got it in our smartphones, right? We have Google, we have information available to us at any given moment. So knowing facts may not be what we want to rely on as L&D folks doing, our taking to market our learning solutions. It's really how do we build more creative and innovative thinkers? How do we build more leadership capacity? And how do we reduce barriers so people that can get to that information they need at that moment of need, which will be an interesting session that Con leads this afternoon on the 5 moments of need. So along with all of that, then the third part I wanted to touch on a little bit today, and I know I'm kind of just fire hosing a lot of this stuff out, but okay, so we've got what's changing with how we live, what's changing with how we conduct business, what's changing with how we work, and how our workforces are impacted. And this was an interesting guide that came out last year where they did a survey of chief human resource officers. And in this study, it said a little more than 53% of CHROs are reasonably or highly confident in their organization's ability to prepare for the shifts ahead. So again, I would say this is another call to action for folks in HR and in L&D, that we're not quite there yet with architecting how our workforces, how we're going to support our workforces and the changes that are necessary for them as all of this transformation happens. We know our number one responsibility is to make sure that workforce is prepared for the future of work. I think the other call to action here is, well, how do we upskill ourselves in L&D and in HR to be able to be more proactive in creating the learning solutions and the training strategies and all of those things that will keep our workforces competitive. We have to upskill ourselves as we do that as well. So we have to make that investment in ourselves so that we can definitely make that investment in our workforces. I thought this was an interesting list of skills required for the future of work that was put out recently by the World Economic Forum. That came out this year. And they really, when we move away from that more information-driven worker, that more task-based worker, these are the skills that the World Economic Forum says are going to be required for people to succeed as our workplaces change. And so us in L&D, what are we doing in these areas with our workforces? And again, these aren't just skills that certain levels of workers need. These are skills that our entire workforces need to think about. And if you think about my workforce that I support, primarily it's a frontline workforce, but their work is getting more and more complex and more driven with technology, if you will. Even our agents who load bags into the plane, you would think, okay, that's a pretty manual job. It's it's taking heavy baggage and putting it in the bins under the plane and making sure that all of the bags for all those passengers on that plane are loaded. Well, that's not necessarily just a manual job, because we guarantee your bag will be tracked. And in our consumer app, you can watch your bag be loaded onto the plane in the app. It'll notify you when your bag is loaded, and it'll notify you what carousel or claim area your bag is in. Within 20 minutes, is the promise of your bag being available to you. Well, to make all that happen requires technology, and these ramp agents, which we refer to them as, have to leverage technology because every bag has to be scanned and before it's placed onto the airplane. So again, we're integrating technology in every part of the customer journey, if you will, to make sure our customers are informed, and get the service that they expect. So if you look at these skills, what are you doing in your L&D organization to prepare your workforce for the future of work as it applies to these skills? I think another thing to think about, if we move too slow in developing these skills in the workforce, we really will risk negatively impacting our organization's ability to be successful in their strategies. If we move too fast, that leads to confusion and chaos in our workforce. So I think that's where we have to reorient ourselves and have that seat at the table, if you will, to have the right discussions with the lines of business so that we're in front of um, all of what our workers need at the time they need it, if you will, so that they can be successful as these transitions happen. We are undergoing quite a massive transformation in our internal systems and how our agents use those systems to drive the customer experience. And along with that is a big, almost what you might call an old term, but change management construct, where we're having to not only train people on a new system, because that's not the real difficult part, but it's really how to apply the context of why the system needs to change in the first place, right? So there's definitely an impact on our people's jobs. There's an impact on the work itself and the way work has gotten done and the way work needs to get done in the future. That's quite significant as these skills need to be integrated into our workforces. So some of what I was kind of wanting to share with you a little bit when I talk about reorienting L&D for the digital age is a little bit of what were we like pre-digital age, I'll call it. Because I've been in this business for 20 something years. I remember I remember the days of laser disc training where we had big laser discs and we would have videos on laser disc and stuff like that. And even before that, before there was any kind of connectivity and pre-internet, if you will. So I go way back, but what were we doing versus what do we need to be doing, and how are we reorienting ourselves here in Delta to drive all of the transformation that's happening in the airline industry? And it's quite significant when you think about what we're doing here at Delta. We've had our busiest year since our inception, and we're almost this year, and we're almost a 100-year-old company. So 2019 was our busiest year. There was one day in June where we flew 704,000 people in one day across 6,200 flights, which was a record for us, and actually quite a record in the industry when you think about it. So in one 24-hour period, 704,000 people were moved around the earth by what we call our MLevel, our Delta planes. And so to make that kind of efficiency, if you will, in how we move people around requires a really scaled workforce. That it's a global workforce that works in an efficiency model that's scaled across our entire operation to make that happen. So there's quite a lot of pressure right now because more people are wanting to travel, more people are wanting to move around, and more people are willing to pay whatever they want to pay to do that. And their expectations of that experience being world class has changed in just the last several years as well. Puts a lot of pressure and constraint on our systems when you think about it. So we've got to change ourselves and how we think about supporting the workforce and preparing the workforce's capability. And if you think about in the sort of pre-digital age L&D world, we created too much training content, and I feel like we're still doing a little bit of that. But on average, L&D organizations only allocate 8% of their staff time to curate content from existing information sources within the company. So we spend the majority of our time creating new content. And instead of adding more to this fire hose of content, we really should be creating content strategies that leverage technology where possible. So, and I think Jordan will be talking a little bit about this afternoon, but to do this, we need to up-level our skills in L&D, in digital technologies. We need to understand the cloud, data, how data intersects with everything we do to drive more awareness to where our impact is. And we need to look at how we can build more personalized learning to reduce the fire hose of just generic training that hits everyone, but how do we create training that is much more personalized for that individual, meets them where they're at, and really helps move them along. The only way we're really going to be able to do that inside of L&D organizations is to up-level ourselves and understanding how we can leverage these technologies that are emerging and some that are now pretty well situated out there to drive these capabilities within our own learning. So we need more technical understanding on our teams. We need more instructional designers that know how to think AI first, quite frankly, when considering performance improvement interventions. Again, and also making sure that you apply technology in that performance situation, that learning situation, that helps you deliver better learning and not just technology for technology's sake, right? And there's a big difference there, and it seems subtle at first, but you really need on your team or even with your partner, your vendor, you need a good understanding of how your business operates and what the practical reality is for you in leveraging a lot of this technology. One thing we did here at Delta is we started looking at where are we leveraging AI within Delta's business functions, and where are we leveraging data to help inform us about, well, what can we do to learn from that and how they're using that in the customer journey, so that we can look at the employee experience and leverage similar technology, if you will. One good example of that is with the consumer app. There's a lot of data generated by our consumer app that could help our employees better understand their customers. And so we have an initiative called the Single Voice of the Customer, so that across different systems that our employees leverage, they can get a view of where the customer is in the particular travel ribbon, the travel journey, where they intersect with them. So if you're say for instance, if you're a flight attendant, you'll get a view of that customer when they come onto the plane. The gate agent that helped them get on the plane has updated that voice of the customer, that view of the customer, if you will. They've updated that to let the flight attendant know through this application that, oh, they have they have 3 children and one child has an allergy and they're going to Disney World, and blah blah blah, so that whatever the gate agent learns about the customer, they update in the system, and then that goes to the flight attendant or the pilot or whomever else is involved in that travel ribbon, so that when you have discussions with the customer, they seem continuous across their travel experience. Another thing to think about is moving from bad data or no data to be influenced by the data you gather. And so I don't ever say we're data driven here in our learning organization, but we're definitely data informed. We don't want to take the human element out of anything we do, but we definitely want to use the data that we can gather about our employees and their activities through our learning solutions and through their work to inform us about whether or not we're doing the right things. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of learning organizations, is understanding the evidence gathered within the learning environment and how to leverage that to improve quality and density of learning, if you will. I mean, historically, we've gotten just information about when something's been completed, as we all know. And I know we're all struggling with how to leverage the right data at the right moment to inform the decisions we make about training. And so you can start very simply by moving just a little bit beyond completion tracking, if you will, into access, and how many people are accessing it, where are they falling off, where are they spending more of their time struggling potentially, or dropping off because they're bored. I mean, you can practically start and pragmatically start by becoming more informed by data, by just figuring out what data matters to you, and if you gather that data, what can you do with it. So that's definitely an area of improvement for L&D that we need to think about now, because we can gather a lot of data about what our employees are doing. So then I talk a little bit about, okay, lots of technology, but little time, versus creating a learning ecosystem. So we need to focus on designing and developing a learning ecosystem, I like to call it, that aligns to our corporate values and how our workforces actually get their job done. And I think that's where we have to take a step into that design thinking model and understand how we get, how your workforce does their job. One of the first things I did when I came here was spend a lot of time working on the ramp under the plane, loading bags, doing that ethnography, if you will, that design thinking, just to understand the job that these folks do, so that whatever learning solutions the team comes up with, it would be relevant and meaningful for how they do their job. And the first thing, obviously, when you're out there under aircraft, is safety. And so the first thing we have to think about is behaviors that drive, less or mitigation of any type of at-risk behavior. So there's just certain types of training we're not going to be doing in certain types of environment. And so we should be repeatedly connecting with evidence, what our top performers do, how their decisions are made while they're in the flow of work, and kind of understand what it means for the experiences you design for them, either in or near the flow of work. So for example, and this is going to Khan's talk about 5 moments of need, which we are implementing here at Delta with Khan's organization. But we realize that there's certain types of work and certain workers who are not going to really be doing a lot of accessing any kind of learning element in the flow of work, but they definitely will near the flow of work. And so it's just understanding, okay, in the flow of work, we want to embed learning into the systems they use, so that they're not so that learning is not a separate thing. But then near that work, we might also want to have more formal learning opportunities, either before or after a shift, if you will, where they can have something reinforced, a concept reinforced or something when they're near the work, when it potentially will have more impact. The other thing to think about is, like I've said before, reorganizing and reskilling our teams. We need to take a stronger perspective and organizing our teams, even where we sit in the corporate structure. This is something to really think about. When I worked at Apple, I did sales training. We reported up through marketing. So we were not in HR. All of the training we did had to go through reviews by marketing people, which at first I was a little jolted by that, but it did lead to unified messaging, less chaos and confusion on product lines that were important to the business, in a much closer relationship with how marketing and learning could work together to help drive the consumer experience, the customer experience. But I think you need to think, like, where are you structured? If you're structured and centrally aligned to the lines of businesses, that's great. But how do you get really deep in understanding of the needs of the business, their changing models and practices? We need to make sure our teams are focused on the right areas that provide the most impact, and move away from just being an order taking shared service model, if you will, which I think is one key component in why CEOs are not significantly investing more. If we've just become order takers as a shared service, are we really driving the impact that they need? And then business people versus learning people, and then moving towards all the new roles that we probably need to have in our organizations. So we need to ensure that our learning teams consist of learning professionals, and that we recognize we're going to need some specialized skill sets that go beyond traditional skill sets in learning. And we need to build learning products, like I said earlier, that leverage technology and instructional integrity that, to truly change behavior out there. So to do that, we're going to need new roles on our teams. We're going to need data analytics. We're going to need user experience experts. We're going to need potentially software engineering if you can't leverage it from your IT or technical groups. When I was at Home Depot, I tried to attract software engineers to the learning team, and actually had a problem doing that, because most of them did not, that I would interview for the job, did not want to be like orphaned. One person told me, well, why would I as an engineer want to be orphaned into a learning function? I want to be with other engineers. But we need to figure out how we integrate that skill set into our learning organizations, because in a lot of ways you're building not just learning solutions, in some ways you're building software products as well, right? So you have to think about the skill sets you have on your team. So realistically, the value prop for learning, and going back to that, should we own the customer experience? Really, it was a fake question to kind of jolt your thinking. Yes, I think we should own the customer experience. I think we definitely have a key part to play in partnering and driving that customer experience, because at the end of the day, we drive the employee experience. And the old adage we had at Home Depot was, if we take care of our employees, they will take care of our customers. So in learning, we need to recognize that creating resilience, supporting upskilling, and helping people prepare for new modes of work must be our value proposition going forward. And we literally do need a seat at the table, and we do need to own more responsibility and take more accountability for the success of the businesses we support. So I hope I didn't sound too preachy into throwing too much data out, but that's my key presentation for you today. If there's time for questions, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Brandon, thank you. Great insight. Obviously, this is my second time going through the presentation. And I told Brandon prior to us getting started, I was excited because I could actually get more notes down. I saw this in Chicago when we were
Well,
together.
all of the notes are in my presentation. If you want that, definitely share it with folks too. So everything I sort of took you through is in the notes of the PowerPoint. So
That's great. Well, we appreciate that. Yeah, we definitely have some time. If you have any questions for Brandon, go ahead and put them in the chat channel, either to all panelists or directly to myself, and I can definitely relay those to Brandon. So Brandon, let's just give it a couple seconds to see if something comes through.
there's one from Scott. So good question. What is an actionable way to prepare a learner for AI? So there's a couple of things there when you think about it. So what artificial intelligence is going to bring to the business is first at a task level. And so we probably should not talk about jobs when we talk about AI. It's going to impact tasks. And so if you think about any task a human's performing that takes a short amount of time, seconds to a minute, that task is probably automatable. And so if that's an automatable task, then it needs to go away from a human worker doing it. But I think the key question there is, and one thing we're doing at Delta, and we're doing it with Con and Bob from the 5 Months of Need, is we're doing a complete scrub of our kind of an old style job task analysis, but we're getting down to the level of the tasks that are being performed within these specific job roles. And then we're working with our lines of business. So for example, there's a lot of tasks on our ramp under the plane that are now being automated. And so one of the things we're looking at automating is pushing back the plane. So instead of a human driver pushing the plane back, eventually there will be a machine pushing that back. And so that's a skill that humans may still need to understand. They may not be performing that task a lot. They may need to perform that task at some times. So they may be cobotting, they may be working cooperatively with machines. And so I think the actionable way to prepare a learner for AI is to really do an inventory, a behavior catalog, if you will, of all the tasks that humans do now in your workplace, and you identify what's probably going to be automatable, and you may not need to train the same way on that going forward. But the other component to that is to also help the workforce understand what that impact to them in their work is. And I've had a lot of folks worry about automation and worry about whether or not they're going to lose their jobs. And so it's like, what is the company's strategy as it applies to these tasks are going to be automated? How does that impact the job that person does? I think that's a key part for all of us in L&D to focus on, is not just the scrubbing of the task, which we need to do, and we need to figure out what we train on, what we train machines on versus what we train humans on, but how does that impact the human component in the job overall? I hope that answered the question. I'm not sure.
Brandon, one that Let's see. Yeah, perfect. So Scott, that was perfect for him. One that I
Thanks,
had that
Scott.
I want to follow up with you on is, can we dig a little bit deeper in regards to the roles of technology within learning and the recruiting? Obviously, the challenges that you experienced at Home Depot. Have you already started going down that route at Delta? Are you finding that time has allowed us to face those challenges? Maybe you're a very forward thinker. It might have been a little early at the Home Depot days, but at Delta, is that changing?
Well, no, it's a challenge. And I think and I don't really like to use the word war a lot, but there is a war for talent in our learning organizations, not just in our workplaces. And I honestly think we have a massive reskilling we need to do within our learning function. And like I said, it's difficult to attract certain types of talent to a learning organization unless you can offer them obviously growth opportunities, development, that kind of stuff. On the other hand, it's also a great opportunity for forward thinkers to come into an organization and really help transform it. And so, one of the things that we know we have to bridge the gap is back to that slide where I talked about technology investment in businesses versus CEO investments in training. Training is now becoming much more critical to the success of the operation. You must have that, most a good number of CEOs are worried about that capability in their workforce, right? So this is now our time to go argue for the budgets and the resources and the investments we need. And I think that's our critical skill is, do we have learning leaders that can bring a business justification forward to drive deeper investment in learning, right? Can you project 3 to 5 years out? I mean, we won't go much further in our business strategy than 3 to 5 years right now. But what does your learning organization look like in 3 years? And what skills are you going to need? And I definitely am challenging our academic institutions and organizations to help us figure that out, because if someone goes to a degree a graduate program in college for instructional technology or instructional design, are those institutions training them on the right technologies, the right thinking, the critical skills that are necessary to be in a forward thinking learning environment, right? And I don't think I've been reviewing some of the syllabi that comes out of these academic organizations, and they're still teaching like the basics of Articulate and things like that, instead of AI and intelligent machinery and kind of how that's changing. And so I think if we're not careful, we're going to be in this sort of irrelevant space where we don't have the skill sets necessary. So I think it's a challenge for us, and I think we have to take proactive initiative to figure out how we upskill our own people and reskill our own people in that way. It's not going to be easy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that insight, and obviously, helping us understand better what we're going to be faced with, and we're faced with currently. So, Brandon, thank you for your time. Obviously,
Thank
very
you.
busy in regards to what you're doing. Everybody
No
will be
worries.
receiving "Learning in the Age of Immediacy" that Brandon has written. It's a great book. It's a very easy read, but there's a lot of information packed into the pages that are there. So we'll be sending that out for attending Brandon's session. And Brandon, as always, thank you for being part of our family here at MLevel.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Enjoyed the time.
Okay, so we're going to be making a transition. We're going to be taking a quick break for lunch and allowing you some time to get lunch, get coffee, just depending if you're on the West Coast or the East Coast. But we want to make sure that you have that time, as that was feedback that we received yesterday. So we will be coming back here with Jordan Fladell, the CEO of MLevel, very shortly. And Jordan will be focused on AI. Are we there yet? So that'll be a great segment that really follows up with what Brandon was just talking about on the AI side. And Scott, hopefully that can answer some additional questions that you might have and challenge some of your thinking there. So we'll take that quick break. We'll be coming back at 12:30.